I'd like to start international user group meeting. Thank you so much for joining us today and interest in iSync product. I'm Dave Kim, iSync Wave project leader and a director of Corporate Research Center of iMediSync. Today, I'd like to introduce a concept of EEG phenotype model, which we can understand EEG landscape more systematically. And then I'd like to start a review of case series where we can find usefulness of QEEG for understanding a specific patient and designing a personalized intervention. Today and next meeting, I can share my cases for describing iSync brain analysis more detail with patient cases. And then we can share our cases together and discuss together what's the best way to associate patient symptom with QEEG and how we can design a personalized intervention. I'd like to repeat core concept again briefly. Most basic phenotype is under-arousal and over-arousal, which we can identify in iSync Wave quick summary and detailed full report in iSync Brain. The left panel shows conventional EEG spectra having peak in alpha frequency band. The power decrease with frequency is normal pattern except alpha peak. Alpha is basically resting rhythm, and we can estimate low frequency below alpha reflect more deep relaxation, and upper frequency above alpha reflect more concentration. And alpha power usually stronger in the back of the head because frontal lobe is busier in healthy normal condition. At this point, we can define two EEG phenotype. One is overarousal, and the other is underarousal. The underarousal phenotype, alpha peak frequency is decreased. Frontal alpha dominate compared to the posterior alpha. Alpha rhythmicity disappears. Finally, theta rhythm appears, which is shown in peak frequency located in this theta band instead of alpha band. All this pattern can be categorized as underarousal, which often associated with cognitive decline, degenerative disorder, and developmental disorder, and etc. On the other hand, there is overarousal phenotype, which is exactly opposite direction. Alpha frequency goes higher, alpha desynchronized. In this case, beta spindle appears and dominate, and peak activity is now in beta frequency. These are often associated with symptoms like anxiety, worry, insomnia, addiction, and OCD, and etc. And another important thing is the alpha peak frequency of age dynamics of posterior dominant rhythm. The alpha peak frequency developed into adult range in the early adolescence and decline in normal aging. But alpha frequency is slower than age-relevant average in developmental disorder and cognitive decline in senior population, while alpha frequency is higher than normative value in many overarousal phenotypes, such as PTSD, insomnia, and busy brain. In this slide, I'd like to, before going to the real EEG cases, I'd like to introduce two-dimensional vigilance and brain rate model, which is very useful for understanding QEEG landscape for designing a personalized intervention. The model was developed by Martijn and Jay Gunkelman in the two-dimensional vigilance brain rate model. As you can see here, x-axis is traditional vigilance model made by Bent in 1964. And y-axis is expansion of the model brain rate. In the vigilance model, posterior dominant alpha in the A1 state developed to the A3 state, anteriorized alpha activity, and then alpha desynchronized and theta rhythm appears in the B state and finally develop into the C state, is a kind of sleep state. With this vigilance model and brain speed in the y-axis, we can identify four different brainwave direction, and we can match medication with each directions. Now, wait a moment, I have to turn off my messenger here. Okay. And there are four different brainwave directions. We can match medication with each direction. In the healthy brain, alpha is idling rhythm at the back of the head, especially visual cortex during the eye closed. Frontal lobe is CEO brain, do not have alpha compared to the back of the head. A state with anteriorized alpha, for example, anteriorized alpha could be associated with brain fog, low mood, and this state responds to the antidepressant medication, which gently activate the brain state. The B state, showing further slowing theta activity, could respond to the stimulant medication. In the y-axis, alpha peak frequency is brain rate or brain speed, which is the fundamental information processing with thalamocortical synchronization. Too slow alpha peak frequency could show sluggish information processing, which activated by norepinephrine medication. In the opposite direction, the alpha peak frequency is too high or alpha desynchronized and fast beta wave developed, which could responsive to the GABA or anticonvulsant medication. I think you can catch this model is more organized with intervention concept, but basic idea is well matched with the concept I described in the previous page. In terms of neurofeedback, we can use counter-regulatory mechanism of brain rhythm. SMR, sensory motor rhythm generated at the sensory motor area, can prevent a state change from A3 state to B state, which is very useful for the frontal theta dominant ADHD. Also useful for cognitive decline, which I will show later. Sleep spindle help to keep a deep sleep in C state, while fast beta can prevent a state change from B state to C state. More detail, we can refer their book, J. Gunkelman and Martin An, Neurofeedback and Neuromodulation Technique and Application, published by Elsevier. I'd like to briefly show under-arousal and over-arousal low data as an example in iSync brain. This EEG low data is kind of a very slow wave under-arousal pattern. And this is the normal alpha rhythm in the back of the head. And in this case, the beta spindle in the frontal area is a kind of over-arousal. And this case, you can see there are a lot of alpha, very small alpha amplitude, but a lot of oscillation. Usually, this is 1 second period. Usually 10 hertz is the normal, but in this case, there are many oscillations here. The alpha frequency is very fast and a lot of small beta activity we can see. This is the overarousal. And basically, we describe the underarousal and overarousal. At this point, I'd like to, in this session, I'd like to show 4 different cases. The first case is the ADHD case. The 12 years old male subject, basically game addiction and low school performance, no medication at the time of the EEG recording. The main finding at the frontal theta and central mu rhythm, I'd like to show his EEG on the iSync brain platform here. This is his EEG. Basically, this is the raw data. You can see the horizontal eye movement, and you can see the eye blinking, and you can see the eye blinking and the kind of movement artifact. And we can see kind of small artifact area epoch. And this is the raw data. And this is the clean data made by AI. And we can see here is this is the lambda activity, the eye movement activity in the posterior area, for example. And we can see this is the normal alpha rhythm, and this is the slow theta rhythm in the frontal area. You can see, and this is the normal alpha rhythm and slow wave at the in the frontal area. You can see the slow wave here too. And we can also see the slow wave here like this. This is the alpha activity around 10 hertz. This is the 1 second. There is a 10 up and down in the 1 second period. And this is the one, this is another 1 second. There is only 5 or 6 oscillations. This is the frontal theta activity. This is the raw data of this ADHD patient. And we can see the component. The first component, the basically 19 component, usually in the order of the power. First component is the major component in his brain activity. First component coming from the lingual generated normal alpha rhythm. And second is another occipital generated alpha rhythm. And third is kind of alpha rhythm too. And fourth activity is precuneus generated alpha activity. Sorry for, I'd like to close my messenger again. And fifth activity is the eye blinking, if normally rejected by the AI. And the sixth activity is another parietal generated alpha activity. And the seventh component is coming from the medial frontal generated. This is the theta activity, basically. This is the frontal theta component. You can see this is, we can associate this with the ADHD symptom, basically. And we can see another superior frontal generated theta activity here, component 8. And component 9 is the horizontal eye movement is rejected by AI. And component 10 is another posterior alpha activity. Component 11 is a mu rhythm. We can easily see this kind of activity in the developmental disorder. Mu rhythm is kind of idling rhythm in the center of the head, and usually block the information processing from back to the forehead. back to the frontal area. In the left mu rhythm block the logical information processing, and we can see here there is another mu rhythm here. This mu rhythm block the non-logical information processing, for example, emotional processing. The emotional information processing from the back to the frontal area is blocked by this idling rhythm in the central area. The central mu rhythm we can observe many times in the developmental disorder. In this case, we have left and right mu rhythm, and we have another frontal theta activity here, and the temporal theta activity here. Temporal slow activity is not a good sign, basically. And in this case, the first major component is coming from the back of the head. In the middle of the component, there are a lot of theta activity. If the theta activity in the first order of the first part of the component, that in that case the symptom is more worse, because the first part of the component usually has the highest power. In this case, the theta activity in the frontal and temporal is in the middle of the component, so component list. So the symptom is mild, not I think, but basically the frontal theta and temporal slow activity is not a healthy activity, and we can associate this frontal slow activity with his ADHD symptom, basically. And in the frequency band activity, this is the absolute power, and we can see the excessive theta activity and central slow alpha activity and the central mu activity. Usually the mu frequency is slightly larger than normal alpha peak frequency. In this case, there are absolutely theta activity is excessive in the frontal area. You can see this in the 1 hertz spin topo map like this. And we can also see the frequency, relative power spectra. There is excessive slow activity in the frontal area, and the central view is excessive in this case. And we can also see the same frequency distribution in this spectra. We can see the red line is excessive frequency area. In this case, we can see the 6.5 hertz is excessive in the FG, the frontal area, for example. And the excessive theta is the main problem in this case, and there is a central view activity. The frequency is 10 hertz, is excessive too, and the occipital alpha peak frequency is slightly lower than 10 hertz mu frequency. This is 9.5 hertz. This is the basic frequency spectra of this patient, and this is alpha peak frequency, G-score of the frequency and amplitude. Sorry about that. And the power ratio shows the highest deviant area in this right frontal area. And we can also see the source level activity like this in the 3D animation can show more conveniently the activity pattern in the G-score mapping. We can see the theta activity in the absolute power. We can see the lot of excess in the frontal and medial part, anterior medial part of the brain, like this. In the theta activity and in the relative power, and we can also see the relative excessive area in this frontal area, especially in the theta band. We can also see, also check where is the most excessive area, like this. This is the list of the most excessive area, and we can use another criteria. Only we can choose 2.0. Only excessive area having this score over 2 can be listed like this. There are a lot of area is excessive, entorhinal and orbitofrontal, for example, and also middle frontal area and anterior cingulate area is excessive. And we can also see the connectivity of abnormality pattern like this. In this theta band, in this case, theta is the main abnormality in this specific ADHD case. And this is the theta band. And in the frontal area, a lot of hypercoherence between left and right. That's the main issue. And this is the simple brief case review for the ADHD. Basically, the underarousal pattern in this case. I'd like to show you the presentation again. In the previous case, basically the underarousal pattern, excessive frontal theta phenotype, but I'd like to emphasize ADHD does not always show frontal theta phenotype, as we show in this presentation, in this slide. Sometimes this blue is the underarousal phenotype, red is overarousal phenotype. So in the same ADHD disease group, there are many kinds of overarousal and underarousal phenotype, and there are many overarousal phenotypes. So we can design an intervention based on EEG phenotype. This is the summary of a phenotype paper published by the J. Gunkelman. Please find more detail in his paper in Clinical EEG and Neuroscience in 2005 and 2014. Basically, frontal theta phenotype is well respond to the dopamine reuptake inhibitor, and the frontal slow frequency alpha excess will respond to the norepinephrine agonist, and frontal age appropriate alpha excess can be response to the SSRI. Basically, the beta spindle can be respond to the anticonvergent or GABA agent. The paroxysmal and epileptic form also respond to the anticonvergent. Basic intervention approach is very aligned to the previous two-dimensional model. Basically, the EEG phenotype, we can use this phenotype to design the personalized intervention.